Tonight, the man behind the memo, the most political name in Europe, and taking a racial vacation.
I feel like white people shouldn't even have passports.
Russian and Syrian warplanes have intensified their attacks in northern Syria after rebels shot down a Russian fighter jet. Around 20 people have been killed and dozens injured in Idlib province, which is controlled by rebel fighters. Medical relief and rescue workers said on Twitter that chemical weapons were used in an attack and pointed to the use of chlorine gas. Russia has denied targeting civilians and says it's only going after the rebel groups. The sole surviving suspect in the 2015 terror attacks on Paris appeared in court today in Brussels. Salah Abdeslam is facing charges related to a shootout in Belgium that eventually led to his arrest 4 months after the coordinated attacks in France that killed 130 people. Belgian prosecutors have accused him of attempted murder in a terrorist context, and he faces up to 40 years in prison. At today's hearing, Abdeslam said his silence would be his defense, and he wouldn't answer any questions from the judge. The heir apparent to the family that runs Samsung walked out of jail a free man today. Lee Jae-young, a vice chairman at the company, had served nearly a year behind bars after he was convicted on bribery and other corruption charges. That verdict was seen as a win for hundreds of thousands of anti-corruption protesters in South Korea. But an appeals court today cut Lee's 5-year sentence in half and then suspended it. A section of brick wall that an amateur historian recently revealed to the world has now been officially recognized as part of the original Berlin Wall. Christian Bormann, who grew up in East Berlin, discovered the nearly 300-foot stretch in 1999, but it wasn't until last month that he publicized its existence on his blog. Berlin's culture ministry said today that it's granting protected status to the relic. The announcement comes on a historically significant date. The wall has now been down for the same amount of time that it was up, 10,316 days. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed more than 1,100 points down today, the worst single-day point drop in history. One reason for the drop is the worry that the new Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, who was officially sworn in today, will accelerate interest rate hikes to counter inflation. The White House, which has hyped up market gains, said today that economic fundamentals remain, quote, exceptionally strong. The House Intelligence Committee voted unanimously this evening to release the Democratic response to the committee's memo attacking the Justice Department's handling of the Russia investigation.
We think this will help inform the public of the many distortions and inaccuracies in the majority memo.
The new document now goes to DOJ for review, and then the president will have 5 days to decide whether to keep it from going public. The memo back and forth is still the biggest story in Washington, and in the center of it is Congressman Devin Nunes himself, who President Trump praised today as a great American hero. Democrats are hoping to use the memo as a weapon against Nunes in his re-election. But at home in his California district, that's not exactly how it's playing out.
Devin Nunes' district is about as far from Washington as you can get. It starts in the eastern suburbs of Fresno and runs east and south through California's Central Valley, some of the most productive farmland in the world. Nunes grew up farming in the area on land that his family's worked since immigrating from Portugal 3 generations ago. He holds 2 degrees in agriculture and got a start in government as the state director for the USDA's Rural Development Branch. Nunes' memo may have made him divisive nationally, but locally, in a district where the farming industry is worth billions, his background puts him right in line with his constituents.
A bag, a box, truckload.
Nick Salazar is a 5th-generation farmer. If you ask him about politics, he's got one issue at the top of his list.
Water. We need water. Water storage. I mean, we've been in a drought the last couple of years. Last year we had a good wet year. This year looks like we're going to have a dry year.
Water is a big part of Nunes' platform here in his district. He supported building more dams, which he says would prevent water shortages that affect farmers. Environmentalists have fought these proposals, and Nunes hasn't succeeded in building any dams. But Salazar says Nunes is fighting for his interests, and he likes the Nunes memo.
I think it was great. I think I would like to see more stuff come out. Some of the investigation into Trump was paid for by Hillary Clinton and the DNC. I support him 100%. I'll continue to vote for him.
What people thought about the memo depended on what they already thought about it before it was released. What does the memo, I guess, mean for you?
How deep corruption is and how political the FBI, the top echelon of the FBI has gotten. They're supposed to not be political. And the hatred that they have for Trump, it just overrides every decision that they make.
Do you think that the memo is going to be a boost for Nunes in the upcoming election?
I think so.
The Nunes memo, I think it is a distraction. Right now, what I feel is happening is we're being turned against the FBI, and what we should be doing is letting them do their job.
Nunes' main competitor is hoping there are a lot of people like Nicholas Anderson from both parties. Andrew Janz is a prosecutor in Fresno. Like Nunes, he's from the district and comes from an immigrant background. His father was born in Canada and his mother in Thailand. This weekend, he threw a Super Bowl party at his house to thank his volunteers.
That is the front page of CNN.com.
He's been campaigning for the past 10 months, but his breakthrough was in December with a billboard that didn't even mention his name.
Tell me about the billboard.
The message we were trying to get across is that Devin Nunes and Donald Trump are working for Putin. And so we have Putin holding both of them on a child leash. Devin is holding an ice cream, and Donald Trump is crying because he didn't get an ice cream.
Okay, how is that a good idea in a district that voted for Trump?
The message that comes across to people is that I'm not going to be afraid to attack the President of the United States. I'm not going to be afraid to attack an 8-term incumbent. I can tell you that on the day that Nunes released his memo, we raised about $100,000. The day after, we raised about $150,000, and today we're on track to do the same thing. So
basically every time Nunes does something,
absolutely,
you get money.
Absolutely. By the end of this quarter, we should probably have $1 million in our bank account.
According to the latest FEC filings, Nunes has $3.8 million on hand. That's more than any other congressional candidate in California.
We need to be able to raise money to tell our story. We need to nationalize this race.
Janz may want to nationalize the election, but that saying about all politics being local, it's not wrong. And where it counts, Nunes' support is still strong.
It's Washington, D.C., so nothing happens overnight. But he's fighting for us, and that's all I can ask for.
Preliminary numbers out this week are showing how the latest round of Obamacare enrollment is shaking out. Overall signups are down nationwide. Nearly 11.8 million people have opted for these insurance plans for 2018, compared to 12.2 million people last year. But some states are going against that trend, and actually saw an increase in the number of people who signed up for health care.
Republicans haven't managed to fully repeal the Affordable Care Act yet, but they didn't have to in order to undermine it. Remember, the Trump administration made a handful of seemingly small but pretty impactful moves before people started enrolling in healthcare plans last year. They slashed advertising by 90%, cut funding for advocacy groups to help sign people up by more than 40%, and reduced the enrollment period by half. 39 states rely fully or in part on the federal government to run their insurance exchanges, and you can already see evidence that these cuts affected signups in those states. Enrollment in nearly all of them was down. But 11 states, plus DC, run their own insurance exchanges, and they get to do things how they want. So most of them kept their enrollment period open longer, and some spent big on advertising. That all paid off. A majority of those states that run their own exchanges saw their enrollment figures go up. California is a good example. The state runs its own exchange, Covered California, and it expanded its marketing budget to $111 million for the latest enrollment period, up from $95 million for the one before. They spent that in part on a media blitz that included everything from web, radio, and TV ads to billboards, murals, and even a couple of bus tours promoting health insurance. Last year, California enrolled more than 1.5 million people in health insurance. And while the state hasn't put out final numbers for the most recent enrollment period, officials I spoke to there said they're on track to beat their 2017 signups.
If you know you have a health condition like cancer or diabetes, you don't need to be sold. You sign up. But given that health insurance is priced on the overall pool of people covered, the more healthy people you get signed up means they're paying premiums to avoid paying unforeseen bill. You want a lot of those people to sign up, and it lowers healthcare costs. In California, we've actually done such a good job in marketing that our healthcare costs for everybody, in particular people that don't get a subsidy, is 20% less than it would have been. It's a direct payoff to lower healthcare premiums.
Hundreds of thousands of Greeks poured into the streets of Athens on Sunday to vent their outrage, not at their own economic woes, but at what they see as a mortal threat to Greek identity, the word Macedonia. The Republic of Macedonia came into existence in 1991, when the former Yugoslavia broke up. But there already was a Macedonia, the largest province in Greece, next door. And as far as Greece is concerned, the name and the idea of Macedonia are theirs by right.
Alexia and Demetrius came out to protest to send one clear message. The name Macedonia is Greek.
This is about our history, not letting somebody to steal our history. And Macedonia, we have to spread it all over the world. It's Greek.
Both Macedonians are named for the ancient Hellenistic kingdom made famous by Alexander the Great. But Greeks see the Republic of Macedonia as Slavic, and they see the name as a misappropriation of Greek culture, and maybe even a territorial claim, which is why people here only refer to their neighbour as Fyrom, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
Νιώθω ότι σαν Ελληνίδα πρέπει να υπερασπιστώ την πατρίδα μου. Στους προσβάλλουν διότι αυτοί δεν είναι Μακεδόνες. Θέλουν το όνομα Μακεδονία γιατί θέλουν να μπουν στο ΝΑΤΟ.
Macedonia is keen to join both NATO and the EU, but Greece won't allow it until there's an answer to the naming dispute.
Do you think that Macedonia should be allowed to enter the EU and NATO?
Να μπει μόνο εάν δεν έχει το όνομα Μακεδονία.
In 2008, Greece used its veto to block Macedonia from joining NATO, and EU talks are stalled because of the issue. Angelos Syrigos is a professor of international relations based in Athens.
The Republic of Macedonia declared its independence and its formal name in 1991. So why are there large protests now?
There is a battle between NATO and Russia in the Balkans, and they want to put on the safe side Fyrom and put it in NATO.
To have a Balkan ally, basically,
Exactly.
in a time of growing Russian influence.
They want to have a decision on this issue in June this year. So they are pressing both parties, Greece and Fyrom, to solve the issue.
Some of the protesters on Sunday came from ultra-nationalist and right-wing groups, but it wasn't a fringe rally.
You're 21?
Yeah, okay.
This issue has been going on from way before you were born.
Yeah, of course.
So why do you young people care about this issue now?
It's about how you feel for what's happening. I can say the same thing for the World War II. I wasn't born back there, but I know the Nazis were wrong.
The UN is pressuring both sides to find a reasonable compromise. Under a grand bargaining of sorts, the country Macedonia would agree to alter its name and would also agree to change the name of Alexander the Great Airport. But nationalist MPs have vowed to fight the change. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has indicated at least a narrow openness to find middle ground. But some of his constituents aren't giving an inch.
We understand that the Prime Minister says that he would accept a composite of the Macedonia name. So, for example, New Macedonia. No. Would you accept that?
No, it's
Why
not an option for us.
What's an option then?
New Vardaska. Vardaska is a very famous river in Skopje, and this is only the name we can accept as Greeks.
is like heaven right now.
Yeah.
Alexis Bromley is from Nebraska. She needed a break from white people.
In Omaha, it's very segregated. It can be very isolating if you're a person of color. It's hard in Nebraska because it's a red state. And so you just don't know who you interact with on a daily basis, if they believe that you're lesser, if you're inferior, and how that in turn can affect me.
She says the current political climate has only made these feelings worse. So she decided to go on a Women of Color healing retreat in Costa Rica.
Hi, such beautiful smiles. Thank you guys so much for coming. My blackness is bold.
My blackness is uninhibited.
My blackness is strength.
The idea is simple. For 10 days, Black women come together to eat vegan food, meditate, do yoga.
The breath in is the reminder that we are safe.
And to discuss the frustrations of being Black in America.
It's like a mental game all the time, and I'm in these spaces where, constantly getting poked and prodded. Oh, let me touch your hair. Oh, you're really pretty for a Black girl. Black people don't exercise. Black people don't hike. People are automatically gonna have this perception of me before I even open my mouth.
So many people's ideologies are being validated that don't see us as human, that don't see us as people.
This retreat is one of more than a dozen Black-owned travel groups, marketing trips specifically to people who look like Alexis. In the few years that most of these companies have been open, more and more clients are calling them up. At least 5 say they've seen a spike in interest coinciding with Trump's election.
The idea of Black women reclaiming control over their own mind, body, and spirit is exactly what's needed to survive in a system that constantly tells us that our wellness isn't important. We stopped taking care of ourselves because we were taught, you don't matter.
The retreat is the brainchild of Andrea X, a former Brooklynite turned expat.
I left the United States because I was sick of gentrification, racism, just dealing with being this Black woman trying to figure it out there.
It was 2014, and she'd just lost her job as a healthcare facilitator. What started off as a vacation in Costa Rica became her entire new life. She used all of her personal savings to form this retreat.
We needed a safe space that was outside in the United States to hold certain conversations and just to heal. I don't think that we can do that in the United States. I think that we're suffering and suffocating and just dying every single day trying to survive there.
Not every woman can afford to come out to Costa Rica. What can we do for the racism they experience, for women who can't afford to be part of your retreat?
I think that it's important for people in the United States, Black and POC people, to start forming their own spaces there.
Easier said than done. White Americans find themselves in white-only meetings and places all the time, without even trying or noticing. When Black people want a break from feeling like a minority, they often have to make an effort. Alexis made the effort, and it cost her $2,222. But for her and several other women, that's a reasonable price to pay for a retreat that bans white people.
Would having white people on this trip ruin it?
I got my money back. Yeah, I don't think we will be as open and as honest as we are with the group that we're in now.
Yeah. Do you all feel like you've been stereotyped?
One thing I always got is you're so well-spoken. And I don't think people understand how insulting that is. What else would you expect from me?
I'm curious if it's been no different for you since it was the election of President Trump?
We're Black, we knew that racism has been around, but it's a bit more in our face now. It's made me have to pivot my interactions with people and people who actually support Trump. I can't trust you on friendship level, family level, any level if you actually are supporting someone that, is completely racist.
Is some of that anxiety what you feel you need to heal from here?
We're looking for ways to coping mechanisms, and ways to take care of ourselves because we're not on the agenda.
Do you feel like you've increasingly lost the ability to see any shot at a relationship with white people?
Every time I have a conversation with them, I just pick up on certain things that they say, whatever. I pick up on the microaggressions, the passive aggressiveness. I pick up on it. So I decided one day to just eliminate white people from my personal life. And ever since then, my life has been way more breezy.
Do you think it's at all possible that the fact that white racism, white people have sort of made you leave the U.S., start your whole life over somewhere else,
feel the need to avoid them means that they've won?
They didn't push me out the United States. Because if that's the case, they could push me out of any of these countries because they are here. They're everywhere, you know? I feel like white people shouldn't even have passports because they've done enough, especially white Americans. Leave them in the United States. They do not need to come here. They do not.
They should be even able to travel here.
They need to stay in the United States.
But to a white person who's doing their best to be the best white person they can be.
I have no tips for a white person. My tip to white people is to let us have our space, let us have our room, and go hang out with other white people. We're okay. You know, you've done enough damage.
Lokaha samasta sukhino bhavantu.
This retreat, much to Andrea's dismay, is held at a white-owned resort. That doesn't bother the retreat participants. They haven't cut white people out full-time. But 20 minutes down the road, Andrea and a business partner have quietly invested nearly $100,000 to build up their own private retreat space.
This is where we'll have the workshops.
Is this just like a long con to start building your own Black nation out in the middle of Costa Rica?
It is. It is.
Starting with yoga. Yeah. Next is going to be like a mini government.
I don't want to have a mini government, but at the same time, it will be a community of just like Black people living here.
What would you say to someone who's like, you know, it's nice as this sounds like paradise for Black people. In some ways, like it's motivated by the same hate that white people who want to create white nations and white spaces have?
I would say it doesn't have anything to do with them. This is about us healing our community.
Is it practical to create a Black nation in the middle of a jungle? Or to chase all white people off your property? Probably not, and most Black people don't want to do that. But the feelings of isolation that drove Andrea to build her own community aren't that different from what drove Alexis to this retreat in the first place.
Andrea has completely given up on the U.S.
I don't blame her. I have been places outside of the U.S. where I have felt more at home and more included than I have ever in my community.
Is that an upsetting thing? You know, you say it with like this serene face, but to like go visit somewhere that you're not a citizen of and feel more at home than you do in your own country.
Yeah, that's reality. Unfortunately, that's the reality of our country.
That's Vice News Tonight for Monday, February 5th.